As the NFL draft approaches, it seems like Shedeur Sanders could slide down the board. Who would be his best fit if he does? We'll go over him on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the data queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we're going to talk about these NFL rule changes that have come into effect. Also, we're going to talk about the best possible fits with a little bit of a fantasy flavor for some of the top skill guys in the draft like Ashton Jeanty or Tetairoa McMillan. But we're going to start with Shedeur Sanders, who is probably the biggest lightning rod player in the first round of the draft right now. And, you know, where he goes will be a big topic of discussion, and we'll get into it. Before we do, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Michelle, we've talked a little bit about this before, but if you're one of the teams, it seems like Cam Ward's going to go number one overall, and I have to tell you, as the guy who covers the Titans, we won't give too much home cooking here, but Cam Ward's going number one overall to the Titans. Just hear me when I say that. So if you're the Browns or the Giants, are you taking Shedeur Sanders that high if he's available to you?
I am, and I think the best fit for Sanders is the Giants because there are only a couple of teams, right, in the top 10 are still looking for a quarterback, and that's the Browns, the Giants, the Jets. Specifically there, I think those are the three biggest needs for quarterback. And by far, the Giants would be the best landing spot for Shedeur Sanders. And I know they signed Russell Wilson. That should not be keeping them from actually looking for the quarterback of the future at all. I do think this is a nice spot for him to land because, A, it's nice that the team wouldn't have to give up draft capital, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't think unless they have to move up to 2, but if they get to sit there at 3, so you have your draft picks, you have your capital, you already have Malik Neighbors to throw to. I think Darius Slayton is a very solid wide receiver too. I do think Brian Dable is a good play caller. He can be, just needs a quarterback. And I think Sanders overall would be a really good fit there. And I think he would like that New York media as well and that attention, right? So
yes,
if he falls, if the Giants don't take him, the Jets don't take him, he might be falling pretty far in that first round.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be a possibility, but I agree with you. I think the Giants could support a good young quarterback. That's why it was a high topic for them to maybe trade up, because when you do have Malik Neighbors, you mentioned Darius Slayton, they still have Wendell Robinson. They still have Jalen Hyatt, who they took really high in the draft. I think he was a second-round pick for them just a couple of years ago out of Tennessee. You have Andrew Thomas as a bona fide left tackle. Yes, the offensive line still needs some work, but, there are pieces there in New York, which is something I've kind of been consistently saying. But you're right. If he doesn't go in that top 6, top 7, maybe New Orleans takes a chance on him, but there is a chance that he could fall down the board even further. Now, a lot of people might be asking themselves, why would that happen? A lot of people are like, why would Shedeur Sanders fall if Cam Ward's going number one? But our guys over at Locked On NFL Draft, which you should absolutely be subscribed to this time of year, Dame Parson and Keith Sanchez went over that, and Dame kind of broke down the differences between the players.
Of course, arm talent is two different levels of arm talent. The type of throws that Cam can make, Shedeur doesn't have that type of arm. Shedeur's arm it's still good. It's just Cam's arm is on a different level than Shedeur's. He can make those drive throws. He can really put it past the ear hole into those key holes of the defense in between tight coverage, especially against zone. But in the middle of the field, he can drive those type of balls. Also down the field, he's a better shot taker down the field. Also can stretch the field, extend past the safeties, different things like that. He can kill in the 20 yards and deeper area, but also mobility. Like Shedeur is a functional athlete, but he is an extremely slow starter as an athlete. Like this is a guy he's not going to immediately break out of the pocket, and he has to kind of gear up, right? It's like a car. in the South in the cold. Like, yeah, you gotta heat it up a little bit before you start driving it if it's 30 below. With Cam is a better athlete than him. Cam gets out of the pocket quicker. Cam has a better pocket presence than Shedeur. Shedeur still does the dropping back 15. We saw it in the bowl game. He took a sack and got him out of field goal range against BYU, still doing that same stuff of not feeling pressure, drifting towards pressure, drifting too far back. So for me, it's like even in the pocket, I like Cam Ward better than also the ceiling.
I mean, Dame seems to be pretty firm that Cam Ward is a significantly better prospect than Shedeur Sanders. So with that in mind, if Sanders were to drop because, maybe he doesn't have the biggest arm, he's not the best athlete, he's kind of just average in those areas, even though he can't throw with anticipation and accuracy, some teams that maybe would be a good fit for him down the board. I continue to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. We saw the Steelers trade up from like 21-10 for a linebacker. Why wouldn't they make a move similar to that to get the quarterback? Even if they get Aaron Rodgers, same thing as the Giants. Russell Wilson shouldn't stop you from getting a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers should not stop you from getting a quarterback. I think the Rams would also be a pretty good fit. Sean McVay's offense, they have weapons, good system. They're in a dome, good weather, stuff like that. I think he would love the LA market as well, like you said about NYC. Do either of those two teams excite you here for Shedeur Sanders? Is there a team I'm not thinking of?
Those were the two teams I was thinking of exactly if he starts to drop, right? I could see the Steelers moving up for sure. Like the Aaron Rodgers thing, it does look like he'll be there, but right now their starting quarterback is Mason Rudolph. So like they really they're struggling. They need to figure out who's going to be the quarterback of their future. But the Rams, I think, would be a really good fit, right? He's going to have to be patient because Matthew Stafford he's not going to displace Matthew Stafford as the starter. But if he can be patient, Stafford's getting older. I feel like every year we're like, is he going to retire? And I know he just got his new contract. But, with Sean McVay, I think that would be a great fit for him. Sit for a couple of years. And I think he could thrive in the NFL after that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think one hesitation I do have about Pittsburgh is the arm strength and the elements. It sounds like Cleveland is really trying to – that's something that we may talk about next week or something. But Cleveland's really trying to get a new stadium. And they want – a dome stadium, which is what all the owners want now, so they can have concerts and the Final Four and all the different things that you can have if you're indoors. So I wasn't worried about it as much if the Browns decided to go with Sanders, but it doesn't sound like the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be going inside anytime soon. And, with that weather in the AFC North, you wonder if that's a fit. But overall, you could see the vision, especially a guy who throws with accuracy. If you just put an accurate pass up to George Pickens and DK Metcalf, you give them the opportunity to make a big play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great landing spot for any quarterback right now. It just has to be a guy that's willing to put it up and that's accurate. And I do think that can be Sanders. And also with the concerns off the field, right? Maybe a little bit about his behavior or about his dad, Deion Sanders, being too crazy. Mike Tomlin can handle all that, right? We've seen him be able to handle this. So Mike Tomlin's a perfect coach to handle the situation. So yeah, if he starts to fall, you would think he'd be hoping the Steelers would move up for him and grab him.
As we transition, Michelle, your NFL all around. I don't want to pigeonhole you here, but you are one of our fantasy football experts. So as we kind of transition into some fantasy questions, better fantasy quarterback for DK Metcalf and George Pickens, Aaron Rodgers or Shedeur Sanders?
It's Aaron Rodgers. As much as I don't want Aaron Rodgers as a Steelers fan, for fantasy, he would be good for those two guys for sure.
Really, I just wanted to force you to say something positive about Aaron Rodgers on the Steelers. With that being said, though, Ashton Jeanty, Tetairoa, McMillan, Matthew Golden, some other skill position options in the draft. What would be the best fit for them for not only football, but for fantasy as well? Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Look, the college basketball tournament is coming to a close, but you still have the opportunity to watch your favorite team live, feel the energy of the crowd, witness those unforgettable moments. There is nothing like experiencing a big game in person, and the best way to do that is on Gametime. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. And that's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time has the best features in the industry, starting with Game Time Picks that brings the best value and the best tickets directly to you. Also, you get a panoramic view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. No surprise fees at checkout. That's huge. Also, you get the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better price. Make sure that you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about Shedeur Sanders, his potential slide down the board. But now I want to talk about some skill position players who should be going pretty high in the draft. We have a guy like Ashton Jeanty at running back, maybe an Marion Hampton is a guy who I'm a little lower on than it seems like a lot of people are, taking him in the first round. I personally like a guy like Travion Henderson better. Maybe that's my Buckeye bias. But either way, we got some running backs that are available in there. Guy like Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, should go pretty high. Tetairoa, McMillan, Matthew Golden, a bunch of wide receivers in there. So a lot of skill position players that could end up in the first round. The question is how high some of these guys go. And on our NFL squad show, my guy Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons talked about debating the value of running back and tight end, two positions that could go pretty high.
So if you're a team drafting a running, if you're choosing between drafting a running back or a tight end high, maybe higher than people want, the tight end, obviously, because of the pass catching ability and potential, you sort of look at that as, say, if we hit on this could be a huge boost to our offense. But I think kind of the ceiling might be higher with a tight end, but the floor is so much higher with a running back. And so I think when you're having that conversation between these two position groups, I kind of veer more towards the running back position, having a little bit more value in that regard, just because it's just so much easier to get a running back the football in your offense compared to a tight end, especially if you have good wide receivers. So there's only one football to go around and whatnot. So I do feel like running back edges out the tight end just slightly, even if that is unconventional wisdom.
And quite frankly, if you go back and look at tight end versus, I know Brock Bowers was Brock Bowers last year, but historically speaking, running back is one of those positions where you can immediately come in and make an impact. The transition from college to pro is easier than most other positions. Tight end is on the opposite side of that spectrum. Typically, historically speaking, it takes a long time for tight ends to really kick into gear, especially those tight ends that you're taking early. So I know that Brock Bowers kind of broke the mold last year because he was a generational tight end prospect, but I don't know if I would feel comfortable taking a tight end as high as we're seeing like Tyler Warren at 7 and stuff like that. But on the flip side, if I'm the Raiders, I would take Ashton Jeanty. And quite frankly, I think when we talk about fit, the Jacksonville Jaguars might be the best fit for Ashton Jeanty based on what Bucky Irving did with Liam Cohen in Tampa Bay last year.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of competition, though, for him with touches for fantasy, right? Like, I do think he would obviously take over the Travis Etienne and the Tank Bigsby, but still, those are guys he's going to have to compete with. And as a rookie, it's hard to take over those vets. With the Raiders, right now it's Raheem Mostert as the starter, right? Like that would be very easy to get a ton of touches, but I have a better fit if he could just fall slightly, or maybe the Bears want to move up and it's the Bears.
Yeah.
With Ben Johnson, we saw what he could do with his running backs. They fixed up the offensive line already in free agency. They've been doing their work, so they don't have to worry as much in the draft to have to fill those needs. And they have the other skill players, right? They have DJ Moore. They have Roma Dunze. They have Cole Kmet to give Ashton Jeanty that space to work too. So I think that would just be a beautiful fit for him. And yeah, DeAndre Swift might be a little bit of competition, but I think Jeanty would shine in that role with the Bears.
Philosophically speaking, I love that approach. Like we saw that in Detroit. I am someone who believes that luxury positions, safety, linebacker, tight end, running back, you can only take those positions super high in the first round if you are settled at other more premium positions. The Bears have their quarterback. We'll see if Caleb Williams works out, but they have it. You know what I mean? They have Darnell Wright at tight end or at offensive tackle, and Braxton Jones has been solid. And then you have the interior that they just fortified with their 3 acquisitions across guard and center. They had a good defense already. Like, they have talent on defense. They have a Montez Sweat. They have Jalen Johnson at cornerback. Like, the premium positions, top pass rusher. They have good stuff on the interior as well and a good rotation. Like, the Bears are set enough in their roster and should get a bump from coaching. Their roster was better than their record last year. I firmly believe that. And the bump from coaching with what they've done so far, I think it gives them the freedom to make that move. I don't feel that way about the Raiders. How can the Raiders pass on a Tetairoa McMillan when Jacoby Myers is your number 1 wide receiver? Like, how could they potentially pass on a Mason Graham on the interior? You know, Colton Miller, is he going to be around at left tackle longer? Like, I just feel like there are too many premium positions that the Raiders need for them to go running back. But I agree with you. The Bears philosophically make a ton of sense and would probably be his best fit.
Yeah, and the Raiders, absolutely. Like, they should not be even looking towards running back. The reason why we can see this, the reason why he's being mocked there, it's because of Pete Carroll, right? He loves his running back. Absolutely loves them. And they do desperately need a running back, right? But I think this is more of a team that should be looking for a running back in the 2nd, 3rd round. This should not be a premium, priority for them at this early in the draft. And with how deep the running back class is in general, like you said, you can find if you really want a running back that bad, you could probably get a Travion Henderson, a Quinshawn Judkins. You could even slide back a little further for like an RJ Harvey or something like DJ Giddens. There's so many. There's probably 20 to 25 running backs that might go in this draft. And we know that even late round options could be good. But I found it interesting that John Spytek, the Raiders' new general manager, said on Wednesday that his son told the owner, Mark Davis, that if his dad doesn't draft Ashton Jeanty at 6, he's doing a bad job. So the kid totally sabotaging his dad there. We'll see how that goes. But moving to the wide receiver position, you look at Tetairoa McMillan. He could go to a ton of different places. I think, though, that the Raiders do make a ton of sense, like we were talking about, because all they have is Jacoby Myers. But even New England, even with Stephon Diggs on the ACL, like, giving Drake May a big physical target, like who's maybe not quite as physical as you would think for a 6'5" guy. He definitely needs to work on being more physical and getting off press and all that. But I think that New England would be a great fit. Put a big physical jump ball guy who can run routes with Drake May, and you might have a monster duo. So I like Travis Hunter going better to the Patriots to give Drake May that, possession wide receiver that.
Yeah, I'm in for that.
But for McMillan, my favorite landing spot for him would be actually the Panthers at number 8. Bryce Young really stepped up toward the end of last year. I'm excited to see what he can do in his 3rd season with Dave Canales. Dave Canales is a really good play caller. We saw towards the end of last year, Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen, that Deontay Johnson was earlier in the year, but David Moore even had an 81-yard game and a touchdown with Bryce Young. Like, we saw these wide receivers start to really shine with Bryce Young and in this offense. And those guys, I mean, besides Adam Thielen, who's very old at this point, they're not guys starting for any other team. Give Bryce Young this true big wide receiver that could be a wide receiver 1. And I think this would be a great spot for him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I love that. Talking about tight ends, though, to me, like Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, whatever you want to talk about, there are a couple of teams, the Colts, the Broncos, the Chargers. Those 3 teams are in a position where I think they can afford to take a tight end. A tight end makes a ton of sense, and kind of the value and the need match up perfectly. If you could take Tyler Warren, for example, and put him on any of those 3 teams, which do you think would be the best fit?
So the Broncos did sign Evan Ingram, so they probably are out of the tight end market. But the Chargers, on the other hand, they signed Tyler Conklin, but I think that's very different than signing Evan Ingram. I would love the Chargers. No, they are number 22 overall. I don't know if Tyler Warren will last that long.
I don't think so.
But they had to force so many targets to Quentin Johnston last year, right? Mm-hmm. I think they would like a second target, and really all they had was Will Disley at tight end. They need to get Justin Herbert, that true great tight end. I think he could really utilize a guy like that. You had Josh Palmer leaving free agency too. So there's targets to be had. We know Herbert can throw a bunch of touchdowns, and Tyler Warren looks like he can be that Brock Bowers type where he can come in and instantly be a great receiver in the league. So I'm excited to see where he lands. And I'm really hoping it's not the Colts with Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. Like, I don't think that's a good fantasy fit.
Yeah, that would not be a good fantasy fit. One last fantasy related question. Out of all the other wide receivers, not Travis Hunter, not T-Mac, but Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka, maybe either Luther Burden you put in there. I know we don't know where they're going to be yet, but just from your view, are any of those guys sticking out to you as, hey, that's somebody who you really need to watch for in fantasy?
Yeah, I'm really excited for Emeka Egbuka. He's my second favorite wide receiver in this draft. Well, Travis Hunter's hard to rank, right? Because you don't know how a team's going to use him. Right. So if you're not counting him, he's my second favorite. And my favorite landing spot for him would be the Broncos. Bo Nix going into his second year with Sean Payton. And then I think he's a perfect complement to Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton's like that separator guy. He's more of that just big guy that you could target and count on to catch the tough balls. But Egbuka would be that possession receiver for Sutton or for Bo Nix. And I think that would be a great mixture for him with those two guys in Sutton and Egbuka.
I love Emeka Egbuka with the Rams. I just feel like the way he blocks, him and Puka together, that would just be like the perfect Los Angeles Rams duo of wide receivers, take over that Cooper Kupp role right away. But with that being said, there were some big rule changes in the NFL this week. And then there was one big move that didn't happen. So we're going to break down some of those changes right now. All right, football fans, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Shedeur Sanders' potential slide and best fits. We talked about the best fits for some of the skill position players that are going to go in the first round of the NFL draft. Now we need to talk about some of these rule changes. And the biggest news coming out of all of the rule conversation was that the Tush Push did not get banned. And my guy Louie, Legacy Louie from Locked On Eagles, talked about that.
All right, this Tush Push war is going too far. I mean, this is unbelievable. So the NFL did not get the 24 votes needed to ban the push in 2025. Only 16 owners decided against the play. And yet, instead of the rule going through and not having to do this until next year again, the NFL is tabling this until the May meetings. How, because they didn't get the result they wanted, the minority 16 owners, how come they get to table this instead of it being a final decision? I mean, this is unbelievably soft. This play does not impact the NFL enough. It does not cause the harm, the injuries that some of these owners are saying it does. They're jealous. They want an automatic play for one team out of the picture. And I think it's embarrassing how far they're taking this. It really is embarrassing.
Look, the reality is there is no evidence that there are more injuries caused by this. Now, I get what they're arguing is there isn't a big enough sample size to use the lack of injuries to prove that it isn't an increased injury, and the likelihood of a catastrophic injury like a neck injury or, something like that is higher based on the play. I hear all that, but I'm sorry. Until there's proof of it, you can't go off that. And we saw the Buffalo Bills fail at the Tush Push like 4 times against Kansas City. So it's not like even if you have a great quarterback that it's a perfect execution. I don't personally love the play. I'm not gung-ho about it, but there's no evidence to get rid of it right now.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. And also, like, it's the same thing with quarterback sneaks. With you get a serious neck injury, right? When you're all in there, you can get a serious neck injury on any play. I mean, come on. I think I'm with him. I think this is weak. I think it's teams, just being jealous that they can't do it as well as the Eagles. Like, figure out how to do it better. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's irritating when you're watching the Eagles or if your favorite team's going against them and they get into the short yardage situation because they're going to get it with ease. But stop them. Figure out how to stop them or figure out how to do it yourself. And unless every team all of a sudden becomes amazing at it and it's just like an instant first down for every team, then there's no reason to ban it.
I thought that Jeffrey Lurie, the controlling owner of the Eagles, made a great point. He said, I remember back or reading about when they said the forward pass wasn't a football play. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, what they're trying to stifle here is creativity. And it's just not going to happen. Like, as Jurassic Park says, life finds a way. Like, people are going to find a way in these competitive environments to create any edge that they can. So you can get rid of this, but it's just going to get replaced by something else. Someone else is going to find a way to be creative. But I also wanted to hit on the overtime rules. So now, even in the regular season, like it was in the playoffs last year, each team gets a possession no matter what. And Michelle, I know everybody knows what happens when you assume. I am assuming that you like this change. I say I do not like this change. There is no right that you should get the football. How about you stop the other team? All right, how about you stop them and then you get the ball back yourself? I don't like that both teams get the ball in the regular season. Quite frankly, I saw a take that I agreed with. There shouldn't even be overtime in the regular season. That should be specifically for the playoffs. Win it in the regulation like you should. I don't like this overtime rule. Old man yelling at a cloud. Bah humbug.
We don't want this to turn into soccer. We don't want more ties. There hasn't been a tie in the NFL in over the last 2 seasons.
A long time.
That's how we want to keep it, right? But I do think there is something to the overtime thing, getting both teams to have a possession, because since they changed the rule in 2022, where, if the team scores a touchdown first, then the game's over. If they only kick a field goal, you'll still get the possession or your turn for a possession. But since 2022, the team that won the coin toss in overtime has a 30-17-2 record. That's a massive advantage if you win the coin toss. And a coin toss should not have that big of a say in a football game, right? A flip of a coin.
I'd be curious what the regular season numbers are. Like, what does the coin toss create in the, I'm just curious about that number,
Like non-overtime games?
Yeah. I do want to say this. Yeah, like non-overtime, like just, who wins the coin toss? How predictive is that of winning? You know what I mean? If it's similar, then it would defeat the argument. But if it's not similar at all and there's no massive advantage to it, then it would, prop your argument up for sure.
Teams that won the coin toss in overtime this year were 12-4 in 2024. Like, that's too big of an advantage. And there's just teams that are so lucky. The Chiefs have won the coin toss in 5 of their last 6 overtime games, and I think in 5 straight. And they've scored a touchdown or made a field goal on the first drive in 4 of those 5 games. The one team that stopped them fumbled instantly on their first drive, and then the Chiefs won. But the Chiefs are 6-0 in overtime since 2018, but they consistently win the coin toss. So now, they'll have to actually play defense too, and not just have Mahomes score in the first drive.
The one thing I will say is, like we saw in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, I think this will cause teams, like in college, if you know that you get the ball, you get a chance to get the ball, I think teams are going to start taking the ball second.
Oh, yeah.
That's what in the coin toss at the beginning will become entirely irrelevant, because teams are going to take it second, whether they win or, if they win, they just want the ball second, So I think that's the biggest change that we're going to see with this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that makes the most sense. And the coin toss now will be teams wanting to win so they can go second, right? Instead of going first. I will say my preferred overtime would be the college overtime, but at the 40-yard line instead of, I think they started 20 in college.
25.
25. Mm-hmm. Put it at the 40 and just do it that way. And you just keep going back. I love the college overtime.
I like that. So you're out of field goal. I would even say start at the 50. You start at the 50-yard line. You're out of field goal range. You have to do something to get points. You have to do something. So I would like that, but I feel like the NFL doesn't want to go too close to. It's like how college refused to call it the 2-minute warning. They call it the 2-minute timeout, because these leagues just want to make sure that there's separation. It's why college dropped their shot clock from 35 to 30. They won't do 24 because that's too much like the NBA. We got to be different. It's like when you see twins and they have different aesthetic styles, because it's like, we're the same, but we're obviously different. We're our own person. That's how I see it. There are other rules. The kickoff rule, touchbacks coming out to 35, that should create more kickoffs. There were some other rules about like IR returns and stuff like that. Is there any other rule that really stood out to you that you thought would make a big difference in the game?
No, and the kickoff rule, like finally, I think last year we were all excited to see this new kickoff, and it was just like, okay, this is stupid. But now, kickers really they can't just be kicking it out of bounds. Starting at the 35 is huge, like every time. So maybe we'll see more exciting plays, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I just think the kickoff is just one of those things that might be boring in this game, and it can be allowed to have a boring moment here and there.
Right. It's such a violent play that if they're trying to usher violence out of the game, it's basically just dead. Like it's so violent in nature that you're literally running it, and they can make the little spaces different, but it's just high speed, tons of open field. It's just a dangerous play. Punt is the same way, punt coverage and stuff. So what can you do? It's a violent game. And quite frankly, that's what we like about it. Human beings, we like violence. It just is what it is. It's in our nature. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk, as I tell you every single episode. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.